Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. It is now Tuesday, the 8th of April, 2025. Good to be back with you. I was traveling last week for the National Tropical Weather Conference, and I got a lot I want to talk to you about. Some things have been bothering me since that conference, and we got to be ready for some stuff. We do. Hurricane season is approaching. We've got the first forecast from Colorado State University. I want to break that down and make sure people understand what we're looking at, why we have the numbers that we do, what they mean, and what to do now that it is early April with hurricane season a little less than 60 days away. But more importantly than that, we've got to really focus on one key word more than ever before. We've certainly been, I think, pretty good at focusing on that word here in our little empire that we've got going on over the last several years, and that word is impact. Impact over numbers, categories, total numbers of storms, hurricanes, feet above ground for surge, whatever. There's all kinds of numbers. That doesn't matter in the end. It all matters what the impacts are to you. And we need to focus on that more and more and sort of give you a role. And that role is to go out and spread your weather geekness to other people. We need your help here to help solve this pretty bad hurricane problem, and I'll kind of start off with that as we go forward here, all right? Good to be back with you. Let's indeed get started. First of all, again, down at the National Tropical Weather Conference all last week, student conference, which was a week ago today. That was terrific. Got to speak to lots and lots of students down there from the Rio Grande Valley area. Then we had the conference itself, where we got together and learned from each other, different colleagues, speaking and presenting new ideas, rehashing of old ideas, tossing out hopefully what doesn't work, and introducing some new concepts of what might work going forward. Just a very good time of learning and sharing and being ready for yet another hurricane season, which is fast approaching. So with that, let me get into part of the Helene report from the National Hurricane Center, the TCR as it's called, because this is something that really bothered me, and it was part of my presentation as well. And you'll see where I'm going with this. So this is the fatalities by county, and I think we can understand that most of the fatalities from Helene, because of the inland flooding, occurred in South Carolina and North Carolina and in the western parts of those two states. A lot of what we see here is also wind fatality. Fatalities, plural, unfortunately. But then I want to draw your attention, and I'm going to use the color red here. Nope, let's use blue because it'll contrast better. What is the deal with these two dots right here? Down here in the Tampa Bay area, Pinellas and Hillsborough counties, I do believe. Why? Why is that? This, again, I can understand. That flooding, we were going to take the loss on that as a society. It was just too much, too quick. We had the pre-event with all that rain ahead of time. This was bound to happen. This I don't understand, because we had evacuations, we had tremendous messaging, and everything was in place so that we would have no deaths from storm surge. At least that would be the hope. Yet, as I scroll down to this next graphic here, this map with statistics baked into it, look at the fatalities by hazard. The little green diamond deal, this is all of your flood deaths. And again, that I understand. Wind, the red stars, again, fallen trees, that kind of thing, I understand that. There's just not much you can do. Tornado, there were a couple of deaths in Georgia from tornadoes. But then surge is this little blue pin right here. And that is down here, again, in the Tampa Bay area. Do you know the number of deaths from surge was 14? That number should have been 0. Down here along the Tampa Bay area. And what really strikes me about this, and this is where I'm going to come on and get in your face a little bit, look at where the track is. This is the official best track of Helene as it made landfall, and look how far away it was from Tampa. I mean, what are we even doing here? And you look up here, this is where the highest surge occurred, well north of Tampa Bay, 16 feet or so near Keaton Beach. We had cameras in Steinhatchee. We had them in Cedar Key, where They recorded. We saw it with our own eyes, from the eyes of our cameras, surges that came up several feet above ground. And yet there are no deaths from surge that we know of in the areas where we had the highest amount of storm surge. Now, before you say, well, Mark, very few people live in the Big Bend area. Okay, well, that may be true, but they had the largest surge forecast for them, so everybody left. Makes sense. Why then would we have 14 deaths from surge down here? You can't say it's just because of a denser population. I would expect that the people down there in Tampa Bay would also know about storm surge, and a majority of those deaths, I do believe, are also in Pinellas County. So we got a lot of work to do. All right, this bothers me, especially when you look at the closest approach here. Was 104 miles, and we had a camera in Tampa there on Bayshore where it witnessed the surge coming up. We saw it. We all saw it with our eyes. Again, I told you, it's phenomenal. And yet the deaths were all in this area. And the eye was 104 miles away. The core, the worst of the hurricane in terms of the wind, was way over here. And we saw 5 to 8 feet of surge in this area, and we lost 14 people. And a host of other problems over there that we talked about during the conference. People getting, for the lack of a better way to put it, poisoned by the water. There were a lot of amputees that had to happen, or amputations that had to happen. Just a horror story in the wake of this very, very big hurricane. And so I think the problem is, if we go back to the graphic from the National Hurricane Center and look at that track, we're still not completely grasping, not even close, that it is not a line on a map. This is the track of the center. Clearly, the effects extend well away from that center. Look at this. There was one death, at least, from wind down here in southeast Florida, almost 300 miles away, probably more from the center. We have a long way to go. We really, really do. So with all that being said, hurricane season is approaching, and we have to be ready. All right? And that brings me to the forecast. Now look, I understand just as well as anybody out there that the numbers this early in the year in April don't mean anything in terms of what to expect August, September, October. Like, we don't know for sure. So you say, well, why even have them out there? Dr. Klotzbach has the answer to that because people ask that. The number one reason is we are very curious as human beings. We just kind of want to know. And people ask questions. Well, I wonder how busy this hurricane season could be. This goes back about 40 years, at least, when Dr. William Gray started working on that over at CSU. And ever since then, things have gotten incrementally better at figuring out the base conditions that gives us either busy seasons or not busy seasons. Then the details of where those hurricanes go, how strong they're going to be when they get there, and what the impacts are, we have to wait probably many more decades. I don't know, maybe with AI we solve it sooner. And we did discuss AI at the conference. It's fascinating as well, but we're getting there. So I know there's going to be a lot of negativity and a lot of, well, they always say that and they're always wrong. I think people that just throw out immediate negativity, maybe they're not open to learning, that we have to be open to understanding the process. And Dr. Klotzbach lays it out every year. They've done that at Colorado State. Him, the late, great Dr. Bill Gray, everybody's done this. It's all there. It's all archived. They don't fudge the numbers. They don't change things later if they whiff, like 2013, or even 2005 was way under forecast. 2020 was way under forecast. It's not always an aggressive forecast. Sometimes it's underdone, and we end up having a much bigger season. The last couple of years were really, really weird. 23 and 24, even 22, with that strange sort of waiting until the peak time and beyond for things to really get started. This year it looks a little bit more like your run-of-the-mill busy season. So with that, in case you don't know, you've been busy watching all the other stuff going on, and Lord knows there's plenty of it. Let's just take a real quick look at the numbers for this year. 17 named storms. Out of those named storms, 9 are forecast to be hurricanes. That's a lot. 4 of those 9 hurricanes forecast to be Category 3 or higher, with the ACE score, the accumulated cyclone energy, being 155. So, we'll just call it, for the sake of rounding, 10 points under a hyperactive season. All right? We'll just, again, round it up to 165. And then the ACE west of 60 longitude, 93. That's a lot. All right? So these are the important numbers, I think, because this shows us the amount of potential energy that is out there, the accumulated cyclone energy, and it's a complicated, somewhat complicated formula of how it's derived, but this is important. These are important too, these 7, 9, and 4, yes, but the ACE, that says we should have some quality storms, hurricanes, long-lasting and possibly intense. So what are the reasonings behind the forecast? Well, Dr. Gray and Dr. Klotzbach worked hard over their careers to lay all of that out. One of the biggest things that we figured out as a scientific community going back almost 50 years is that what happens in the Pacific affects what happens in the Atlantic. And when we have an El Nino or the abnormal warming through this region, we tend to get less Atlantic hurricanes, unless you have a season like 2023 where everything was way above normal. And it just throws a big monkey wrench into things. But by and large, when the Pacific is not at an El Nino, you usually have at least an average or above average Atlantic hurricane season. And this is a pretty easy thing to track. We have all kinds of ways to do so from a multitude of models. And generally, as we look out, and we're in April right now, and this is kind of one of those, it's called the spring predictability barrier. I'll get into what that means more in a minute. But generally, it looks like we're not going to have an El Nino, and that's this red bar set through here. Very low probabilities of El Nino. And I think that is the most important key. Just not having El Nino does help the Atlantic kind of get a little bit of a leg up because it reduces the wind shear across the tropical Atlantic. Because in an El Nino, you get all that rising air in the Pacific, and it kind of spreads out, and you get that shear and sinking air as well that helps to squash tropical cyclone development. And it doesn't look like we're going to have an El Nino this year. We're 60 days away, less than that now, from the start of the season. But by August, September, October, look at all the different models through here. No, nothing is jumping out as getting way up here into El Nino territory. You've got your statistical models, which are more simple, your dynamical, more involved models, and it's a pretty good consensus. The envelope here, you can almost draw a cone out of it, right? Humans like to categorize everything. I understand it helps us to visualize it, and it does. And you can clearly see nothing is really jumping out. We don't have a wild, divergence in things. It's a pretty straight line right down the middle that we won't have an El Nino, and we will probably be a half a degree either side of just neutral. So that's a very important key to this whole thing. All right. And then, of course, the Atlantic sea surface temperatures and how they deviate from the norm. Now, the last few years here, 23, 24, last couple of years, this area through here was way above normal. This year, it's calmed down, cooled off a little bit. Relative to average, we've had a good, strong subtropical ridge sitting out here. The trades have come through and kind of mixed things up, and it has resulted in a cooler Atlantic. And this is from several days ago through the 31st of March. We'll take a look at the more current picture in just a minute. But by and large, the main development region has cooled off to more reasonable levels, and so that might keep us from beginning to be really hyperactive. But I want to point something out. Helene did not come from here and travel all the way across and end up there. Milton did not come all the way across, get over here, and then go that way. No. Those all started over here. And even in the very infamous, we all remember it, even if you weren't born yet because you've heard about it, 2005, neither Katrina, nor Rita, nor Wilma, none of those three started way out here and stayed hurricanes all the way across. So it matters, but it doesn't matter. We don't have a lot of activity that we can say absolutely came from here in recent memory that ended up being a real big problem. Now, 2017 we did, but that's getting on back there now. We're coming up on 8 years, right? But these last few years, 2021, Ida, Idalia, 23, all the hurricanes, Debbie, Ian that started out down here, I can go on and on and on. This seems to be our little hotbed area. And there's really no way to know how that's going to play out because there's just not a lot of research, honestly, and there's not a lot of records about like what causes that. Why do we get these clusters like that? All of this over here in the eastern Atlantic, this is your correlation. There is a lot of data and research on it, and this correlates very, very well. And you see the western part of the basin, there's just not much correlation between warm Atlantic temperatures and activity in the western part of the basin. There's just some weird stuff going on where we've had a lot of hurricanes in the Gulf and the Caribbean these last several years, really dating back to 2018 with Michael, if you think about it. And the case could be made even farther back, whatever, with Helene in 2016. But I digress. Let's keep moving. Sea surface temperature is another big part of it. And it's a little bit of a mixed bag, all right? So there'll be other updates coming, of course, throughout the rest of the year. Just like in sports, this is very important because I want people to understand. There's definitely been, over the last decade, a propensity for more and more people to be dismissive of science and facts. And that goes against the long-term survivability of the human species. It really does. If you just dismiss everything and that everything's a hoax and everything's for a reason of profitability or some other agenda, and believe me, there is plenty of it that is that, but not everything is. So that being said, when you see that there will be updates being made and you say, well, they're just going to change it to fit their numbers. Oh, really? Is that what coaches do when they adjust what's going on in the game to try to win the game as things progress? Hockey, baseball, football, basketball, whatever the case may be. Even singles tennis players can adjust their game to beat their opponent. They don't stick with the same game plan at the start all the way through to the end. I don't think that ever occurs. Same thing with the weather. It's always changing. They take these things into consideration. They, people being like Dr. Klotzbach, and adjustments are made. So there's that. Just want to put that out there. It's important to understand how this all works. All right. So other forecasts will be coming out, but what about the analogs? I thought this was interesting. 1996. And what are analogs? Analogs are seasons where the background state are similar, past seasons that are similar to what we're looking at now. Not an exact match. You don't line it up and go, ooh, we're going to have another Bertha Fran or another Floyd or another Ike or Irene or Irma, because those are all analogs that had those hurricanes. Could be like '06 where we had almost nothing. You just never know. But these are some interesting analogs. Those were all pretty busy seasons. And a couple of them were some really big ace-producing seasons, all right? So we'll see how all of this evolves as we go forward through time. So speaking of all that, one of the things that we do, and if you've been following my channel for any length of time, you know that this is part of the drill. We look at those different puzzle pieces on at least a weekly basis. It doesn't necessarily need to be done on a daily basis even when we're in hurricane season because, that gets to be a little bit obsessive. But here's the basic background sea surface temperature anomalies map that I like to use, and we can clearly see what's going on. Pretty good warming here off the coast of South America in the Nino 1-2 regions, as we call it. But the main area that the hurricane season hinges upon, the 3-4 region right through here, that area still relatively cool compared to the long-term average. Clearly, no basin-wide El Nino where you got that red just stretched out all across the equatorial Pacific. On the flip side, out in the tropical Atlantic, still a little bit cooler than average, but more important, I think, and this could be really interesting, we're not seeing that dramatic, overwhelming 2 to 3 degrees Celsius warming all through this, like we saw 23 and 24. I wonder if that's substantially well above the baseline warming just sort of threw everything off, just like a very strong La Nina seems to throw everything off. If you just have your run-of-the-mill, okay, everything's back in balance, then I think you could have the potential for a typical busy season, like 2017, like 1996, like those analogs showed us. And that's just something that I've been thinking about, that sometimes maybe these shocks to the system, strong La Nina, a very overwhelming situation like 23-24 with the Atlantic being so much warmer than average, maybe that just is too much on either side, and we get these weird things that happen, like the hurricane season doesn't really get rolling, the meat of it, until almost late September. That's been really odd. We'll see if that happens again this year. So zooming in a little bit, I want to show you some important things. First of all, I'm telling you something, the Gulf of Mexico down here really has warmed since the winter. We saw a lot of it filled in with blue. Not anymore. It is substantially above the long-term average, and that is going to lead to a lot of severe weather to come for this area. The flooding that we're seeing and the record amounts of tornadoes already to date is astounding. It really is. It's just impressive, and not in a good way, obviously. And I think that very warm Gulf water, I mean, come on, it's so easy to understand. It just adds to that because it gets advected into the source areas for our storms as they come out across, whether they're upper level lows, whatever the case may be, they dip down and they all mix up through here, and it's a real big problem. Now that we're getting closer to hurricane season, we have to watch. We're about a month away from seeing when the first Central American gyre starts to try to set up down here, and look at what we've got waiting for it. A very favorable sea surface temperature pattern in the Caribbean, the Gulf, and the Eastern Pacific. So we'll have to see. Now this is interesting too, off the coast here of Mexico, very cold relative to the long-term average. So our breeding grounds might be pretty limited this year. There's going to be some interesting things. But boy, the Caribbean, the Gulf, the Southwest Atlantic, all still running quite a bit above the long-term average. And this will really start to matter as we go forward. Another thing that we can keep an eye on, and this just helps me totally understand everything, is the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index. Basically, the difference between the pressures at Tahiti and in Darwin, way out here in the Southwest Pacific. And when you have a strong and consistently positive SOI, you typically have your strong easterly trade winds that blow this way. And when the SOI is consistently and strongly negative, you have lower pressures over here. Generally, this is a very simple version of it. High pressure in the Westpac, and the wind tends to blow this way more, or at least the trades relax, and you start to warm the Pacific. Bottom line, positive SOI, more of a neutral to La Nina look, like we see here. Negative SOI, more of a El Nino look, and we're nowhere close. Look at that 90-day. It's close to 7, and the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia says that 7 and above is typically your La Nina threshold, whatever. Bottom line is, no, we're nowhere near El Nino stuff, and that's interesting. That's interesting because we're getting through April, the spring predictability barrier, you know, where nature's changing and we're headed towards summer and the models don't really understand it all. It's just one of those things that it's hard to resolve things when you're already warming and changing the trades. It's just a thing that happens every year, and we don't know how we're going to come out the other side. But one clue, look at all of this subsurface cold, and it is cold relative to average, and then just one little area of warm. I think this will get eroded with ease once those trades do kick back in. And no, there's just not a lot of evidence. The subsurface warm pool held at bay, way over in the Westpac. I just don't see that we're going to have an El Nino. It's just not in the cards. I could be shocked, and we all could. But so far, I don't think so. And the Havmollers, this is all your easterly winds. The blues are easterly. These reds through here, it's when the trades relax. And you can even get some westerly wind bursts. And even the Atlantic's kind of brisk with its trades coming up. This is April 8th where we are. And this is the future. Going towards the end of April, no hint of any warming. You don't get any of these reds right here showing up. These are all your good, strong easterly winds through here. Yeah, I just don't see El Nino coming, which is interesting. Because let's take a look at what our friend Ben Knoll is talking about lately. The velocity potential, that's your 200 millibar wind and the ability for the air to lift. Velocity potential. The ECMWF, the Euro, not painting a very rosy picture for hurricanes this year for the Atlantic, for the formation of them, contrary to the last several seasons. And there's been some debate about it, and that's the good thing about social media. If you do it right, you can have healthy debate. Most of us, not everybody, the other good part is you don't have to all agree, but most of us think that, well, the Euro is calling for a pretty warm INSO event, relatively, certainly against what we're seeing, and that helps to sort of skew things. So it's kind of got a bias. If you have a warm Pacific, you're going to tend to focus the rising motion there versus a warm Atlantic. So if it gets that wrong, it's going to get this wrong. So it's going to be a really interesting thing to see how things progress. And there's another tweet here from Ben that addresses that the new Euro that came out a couple days ago favors a warm neutral pattern in the Pacific this year. So a little bit warmer than we are now, so that kind of throws things off. So this will be something fascinating to watch, and we get these new updates every month by about the 5th or so, so the first week of April, or May, I'm sorry, we will revisit this and see if the Euro is like, whoa, wait a minute, I see I need to adjust some things. It doesn't work that way because the Euro is not a person. It's a bunch of computers, physics, and math, but it takes the input data, creates output data, and we will see what happens in early May. But I'm not buying this. It doesn't line up with what we are seeing right now. Could be right, it could be wrong. We'll see. But that's the beauty, is we're able to keep track of it thanks to people like Ben who put it out there. All right? Wrapping up today's long update, it is severe weather season. And again, I think that warm Gulf helps to fuel that. It just makes sense. We're getting a little bit of a break right now, thank goodness, from what we have seen. I mean, the flooding all throughout this region is just ridiculous. The tornadoes that we've had across here, also ridiculous, and it looks like it's going to pick up again towards the end of the month and go right on through the peak season into May. And at that point in time, I will be getting out there at the end of the month with some of our colleagues to study hail. I'm going to talk about that more later, but at least for now, no worries. Just marginal severe weather threats going forward. It's just a transition right now where everything's kind of shut down. So let's enjoy it. Even the 4 through 8 day outlook is blank for the time being. And we'll just look real quick at the GFS here over the next week. Not a lot going on, just a few storms here and there. Even some snow coming in with that cold air. Yes, you can still get snow in April, but by and large, not a bad pattern as we move through the next week. No major storm systems, so hopefully our friends all through here can start to dry out, because that is really, really bad, that flooding that we're seeing from these spring storms. What is this? Oh yeah, that's that. And that's that. I don't even know why I had those up. So that's it. I'm finished. All right. Woohoo! This was a long one, but I felt it was important to break down some things that I was learning about at the National Tropical Weather Conference that was kind of bothering me a little bit, that I think we still have a lot of work to do. And to that end, if you're watching this video, more than likely you're into the weather. Most of our views come when there's a hurricane approaching and people are seeking out useful information. During the off season, it's more of the weather geeks out there, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. Wear that badge of honor with pride. But also do me a favor. Tell people, explain it to them, talk about it. Don't be shy. We talked about that at the conference, that a lot of us when we were growing up didn't want our friends to know that we were weather nerds, because there was some kind of a, I don't know, but like, who cares? You have the power here to inform people. Anybody that says, oh, I get my weather from my default iPhone or Android app or whatever the case may be, just step it up a little. Have a conversation, point them in the direction of what we're doing. Maybe Mike's weather page. He does a terrific job down there in Florida, huge following. And other people, Ben Knoll, Eric Webb, these folks, Tomer, and certainly the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service, for people that are new to an area and they may not grasp these concepts. Point them in the right direction and use that power that you've got as a weather geek to help inform your fellow citizens, because not everybody's into it, and I understand that, right? And we're busy, and we don't take the time to learn and whatever. So, try to do some good and spread the love of weather just a little bit. All right. So that is it from me for now. I will be back. Let's see. I got family vacation coming up. Probably pop a video out on Thursday just to tie things up and whatever, like get going as we get into the rest of April and May, and then we got spring break coming up for my kids, and I'll be gone next week. But yeah, I'll come back Thursday, and we'll talk about a much shorter video of some things that we'll be watching for as we approach May and eventually the start of the hurricane season. All right, that is it from me. I'm Mark Suttle from all of us at HurricaneTrack. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you again in a couple of days.